I was eating my nachos, completely oblivious to the fact that I was hours away from squeezing a tiny human out of my foof. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cyan, for those of you who haven't been here before. Today I'm going to be filming my birth, labour, delivery story. I know that I found these really helpful to watch when I was approaching D-Day, so hopefully I can just provide another kind of positive story for you all. I wanted to give birth at my local hospital, which is where I was born. As I had a low risk pregnancy and I didn't want an epidural, I was fine to have my baby at the midwife-led unit, which was lovely. And I really can't speak highly enough of the midwife team there. All of the care that I had in my stay was amazing. They were total babes. They were so lovely, absolute angels. So my due date was the 19th of November and I actually filmed a vlog a couple of days before my due date where I was decorating. I was absolutely convinced that I wasn't going to go into labour on my due date. I'd had some kind of dull, achy, periody pains on the week leading up to the due date, but there was nothing significant. The Wednesday, so 2 days beforehand, I did lose a teeny tiny little bit of my mucus plug, but I'm talking like it just looked like a little slug. Thursday passed, Friday passed, nothing was really changing. I was so sure that I wasn't going to go into labour on my due date on the Friday that I went out for lunch with my sister. We parked a little way out of town so that I could have a bit of a walk in and out of town. We had lunch together. It was lovely. I was eating my nachos, completely oblivious to the fact that I was hours away from squeezing a tiny human out of my foof. Alex and I had a totally normal evening, had dinner about 8 p.m. We even joked about the fact that we'd at least get one more good night's sleep, which in hindsight, that was tempting fate, I guess. Went to bed about 10 p.m, read my book, all was fine, put my book down, lay down, and all of a sudden I just could not get comfortable, couldn't sleep. And about 11 p.m. I noticed that these achy pains were getting a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more rhythmic. Something just felt a little bit different, you know? And I noticed that it was like every 8 minutes. I was like, okay. At this point, Alex was asleep next to me in bed and I just left him to sleep because they were just rolling along 8 minutes apart. Then I noticed they were kind of 7 minutes apart, 6 minutes apart, 5 minutes apart. They were 5 to 6 minutes apart for a little while. And this was about midnight and I woke Alex up and I was like, I think we need to ring the midwife unit. The lady on the phone was like, oh, is it your first baby? I'm sure that you're not going to be in labour just yet. She basically said she'd had 30 years of experience and she imagined I would be in giving birth 24 hours from that point. And I was thinking, oh my God, I can't do this for 24 hours. And she basically said, you'll be fine. Have you taken 2 paracetamol? Taking 2 paracetamol for that feeling kind of felt like trying to melt an iceberg with a hairdryer. It just wasn't even going to scratch the surface. We came off the phone. I had 2 paracetamol. The other thing she had advised was to get in the bath because she was like, look, if you get into a nice warm bath, if you're in active labour, sometimes it'll speed things up a little bit and you'll know. If you're just in early labour, it will slow things down again. You might be able to go and get some rest. This was at like 1 a.m, 2 a.m. in the morning. So we drew a bath. I got in, Alex downloaded contraction timer app and he was timing them. I was in the bath, we were just like chatting in between. Then progressively it started to feel harder to chat in between and I was like, this definitely isn't spacing out. They were, you know, 4 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, 2 minutes apart, and they were lasting for about a minute each time. So we were both like, I think out of pure desperation, I was like, let me just lie down in bed again and see how I feel. So I got out of the bath. Alex helped me get dry and get into my clothes, got into bed. And in the end, I just was like, do you know what? I need to listen to my body. This is definitely go time, regardless of what the midwife had said. Obviously, she hadn't seen me in person, so how was she to know? I asked Alex to ring back. He did, and he said, can we come in and get checked? Luckily, we only live like just 3-4 minutes from the hospital. We got to the hospital, we got into the assessment room, we had to do a lateral flow test quickly because neither of us had done one, which, you know, come on, Cyan. The midwife was still, I don't want to say like patronising because I understand that they must have so many women going in very early and then they have to turn them away and that must be frustrating for the mothers and just, you know, it's not a great use of the midwife's time. But she was a little bit patronising. She was like, oh, you know, it's your first baby, it's a very strange kind of pain. I'll check you over if it'll make you feel better. She lubed up and she was like, oh, And I really feel like this phrase will just be memorable to me forever. A stretchy 7 centimetres. So that was it. She said I could get straight in the birthing pool, which I did. I just stripped off, got in the pool. It's so funny because previously I'd been Googling like what do people wear in the birthing pool, kind of thought I might like to have something to cover my dignity, but in the moment I did not care. A lot of the things I put in my hospital bag never even came out of the bag, didn't get the fairy lights out, didn't put our playlist on. The midwife asked me if we'd like to put our music on. I just didn't care at that point. All I wanted to do was take all my clothes off and get in that birthing pool. I think I got in the birthing pool at about 6:30 a.m. Then there was a shift change, so the first midwife left, second midwife arrived. This was the lady who was with us for the rest of our delivery, and she was amazing. Like, she was just awesome. I would say that that period of time when I went from 8 centimetres-ish dilated to fully dilated and ready to push, that transition phase was probably the worst part of the labour. Your contractions are getting more intense. I was using my hypnobirthing breathing techniques, which was really helping, but it's kind of just a waiting game at that point, and it felt like it went on and on for so long. Yeah, that was the hardest bit, definitely, and it needed a lot of like Alex coaching me through it. He was like, you can do this, and I do remember saying to him, I can't do it. I'm upstairs. You're a noisy eater. Apologies for the slight interruption, and if you can hear any snorting, snuffling, it's Rue. I'll try and speed up a little bit before she kicks off. So yeah, where was I? Pain relief. I'd put on my birth plan that I didn't want any pain relief if I could help it, basically. I'd said to Alex, if my labour goes on really long or if it looks like I'm really struggling, then you can tell the midwives that that's fine. Because I'd basically put on my birth plan, not to have it, but to consult with Alex. So he knew my kind of caveats for having it. But at this point I kept saying to him, like, you're going to have to speak to them about pain relief. I remember kind of begging him, which he didn't do because he knew that the labour had not gone on very long and I was coping okay, even though I felt like I wasn't. So I don't think he ever actually even asked them about it. The only pain relief that I was quite happy to have was gas and air, and in the end my gas and air just wasn't working. Like, the nozzle on it was broken, so basically every time I tried to inhale it, it was making this, like, the only way I can describe it is it sounded like a goose honking. It was making this really awful sound and I wasn't really getting any kind of hit from it whatsoever. So it was just annoying me more than anything. I just like threw it aside after trying for a few goes. At this point the birthing pool was like a soup of unidentifiable bits floating around, which again I did not care about. I remember the midwife saying, oh, your waters are broken. She was like, stay still, I'm just gonna pull out this membrane. And I remember thinking, like, do whatever you like, but please don't repeat that sentence, because by the time I got to the pushing stage I was ready to go. It just felt like such a relief to actually be able to channel my energy into pushing. And I remember I was trying to use the kind of bearing down, hypnobirthing breathing. And my midwife was like, you're doing some lovely breathing, but you're not going to get this baby out unless you really push. She was like, I love that you're trying to breathe into it, that's great, but you're going to have to just push like you're constipated, basically. And to be honest, that was not that hard to do, because it does kind of feel like your baby is trying to come out of your butt. I was pushing and pushing and pushing for a little while, and then obviously the midwife comes to check you every few minutes in the pool. She puts the Doppler to your stomach, listens to baby's heart rate, and she's keeping an eye on everything, and she basically said you've got a really full bladder, so I think you're going to struggle to get the baby out if your bladder's this full. I feel like I was sat on the toilet for like 10 minutes trying to wee and just nothing was happening. Alex was holding my hand, I was sat on the loo. You know when you're just trying to go and you're thinking like of running water and all of these things to try and just make the moment happen, but nothing was happening. It was so frustrating. So in the end the midwife was like, let's get you out and pop you on the bed and I'll empty your bladder with a catheter. So we did that. I tried to push on the bed for a little bit but didn't really enjoy that. Got back in the birthing pool. As soon as the contraction came I was pushing, and I just remember like making these noises like I must have sounded like a dying cow. That's all I can liken it to. The baby crowning is kind of the bit that everyone refers to as like the ring of fire. Yeah, it was a stinger, I'm not gonna lie. That bit stings. And she kept coming out and then going back in, and then coming out and going back in, which actually when she was finally out, she had the cord around her neck, so I don't know if that was like, you know, she was bungee jumping a little bit. Once the head comes out, everything else just followed. She was out, they put her straight onto me for skin to skin. I couldn't believe it. I had my anti-D injection, she had a vitamin K injection, and I also had the injection to deliver the placenta because I was not interested in any more pushing. When they weighed her, I was like, sorry, could you just check that again, please? She was 9 pounds, 5 ounces. And for those of you in countries where they use kilos, that's about 4.2 kilos. And she looked so small. Like, I still now look at the pictures and I'm like, where was she hiding that 9 pounds, 5 ounces? I don't know. But yeah, quite heavy, quite a big girl. I got out of the birthing pool, delivered the placenta on the bed, and then the midwife stitched me up. I actually didn't have any perineal tears, which is a miracle. I just had 2 little tears at the top, so she put 2 little stitches in for me, and I had gas and air for that. Because I'd been anticipating it not working again, I was like really chugging. All right, come on then. I was like really chugging on it, and the midwife looked at me and she was like, you're high as a kite now. And I was, for that few minutes while she did the stitches. And that was that, she was here. I stayed in overnight, which was my choice. I just wanted like the breastfeeding support, to be honest. Alex went home and tried to get a good night's sleep, and I stayed in. And it was really nice actually, because I ended up being the only lady to stay in overnight. So it was just me and Rue there, and the midwives obviously were really helpful, and they also took her into the office from about 1 AM to 4 AM. Because I'd harvested some colostrum as well, they took a couple of syringes of that so that they could feed her. They took her into the office, just gave her loads of cuddles and stuff, and it meant that I could get 3 hours sleep, which was incredible at that point. So obviously, first baby, when we were just in the room together, I could not have imagined allowing myself to fall asleep, because I was just staring at her the whole time. I was so worried that if I took my eyes off her, something would happen. So yeah, it was nice, because it just meant I knew she was with them and they were looking after her and giving her cuddles, and I could just fall asleep for 3 hours. So that was incredible. In the morning, Alex came in and the midwife came in and checked me and checked her and then discharged us, and we were allowed to go home. Yeah, that was my birth story. I would say overall it was a really positive experience. I definitely don't feel like it was unpleasant, which sounds bizarre because obviously like on paper it's, you know, a relatively painful experience, but I can see why people do it again and again. So I asked on Instagram if anyone had any questions. I'm gonna just answer a few of them that I didn't answer as I was telling the story. So, what was the most useful thing in your hospital bag? I love that question because I barely unpacked my hospital bag, to be honest. One of the most useful things that I took was, let's see if I can reach it, the water in a can. I was loving this. I would say the birthing pool, the water in the can, and drinking ice cold water all the way through just kept me going. You would just shh all over, and then I'd have a nice long drink, and it was so refreshing and just such a nice sensation to focus on compared to some of the other sensations that I had going on at that point. So I would really recommend this. Also, labour wards are just really warm, so it's nice to have something cooling and refreshing. What was harder, pregnancy, labour, or the 4th trimester? So 4th trimester is what they call this newborn phase. So when you're getting used to having your baby, I would definitely say this is harder than labour, just because it's so, I don't know, there's not really an end in sight, or it doesn't feel like there is, even though obviously your baby's gonna grow up, but they're not gonna be like this forever. And you're just, yeah, trying to work it all out. I found it really intense. I found breastfeeding really intense. I could do a whole other video about that. For me, I think I would say pregnancy was harder purely because of my 1st trimester. My second and my third were relatively fine, but I was so sick in my first trimester that I just felt like there was nothing joyful about it, which sounds awful. I know that I felt very blessed as well, but I just felt so ill all the time, and you're meeting your baby is so far away at that point, and you're also just so worried about all the things that might go wrong. I think first trimester was harder for me, and then I would say fourth trimester, and then labour was probably comparatively quite easy, to be honest. What is your biggest piece of advice for labour? That's a good question. I think, to be honest, it would be to trust your body. That sounds, I know it's so cliche and it's kind of annoying to hear that, but your body does know what to do. Just don't fight it, go with it, breathe through it. Keep picturing those tiny little hands and feet. Okay, you get a little pud at the end, a little snuffly pudding. Did you do any labour prep? So I've mentioned hypnobirthing. I did the Positive Birthing Company's course. It's £39, it's all online. Parts of it I kind of cherry picked, to be honest, because I don't know, you'll do the same. You'll watch the modules and you'll know what will work for you, but I definitely found the breathing techniques really helpful. The only other bit of prep I did, or dabbled in, should I say, because I didn't really do it consistently, was Perennial Massage, which I'm not going to elaborate on what that is. Using oil to massage that area can reduce the risk of tearing. I did it a handful of times. You're supposed to do it a couple of times a week for a few weeks at least. I definitely didn't hit that target. I didn't do it as much as I'd intended to. I just could not be bothered, to be perfectly honest. I didn't have any perineal tears, so whether the few times that I did it contributed to that, I don't know. I know that my sister did it quite religiously and she didn't tear either, so I'm sure there's something to be said for it. But that was the only other bit of prep that I did, and it wasn't a very committed effort, let's just say that. On that note, I'm going to go because a certain somebody is getting very tired and cranky. If you are pregnant and you're going to give birth, well, obviously if you're pregnant, you are going to give birth. If you are pregnant and you're watching this video, then I wish you all the luck in the world. I would love to hear about some of your experiences below, or if you're pregnant, if you're expecting, then let me know in the comments. It's such an exciting time, and I'm already getting to the point now where I kind of miss being pregnant, which is dangerous. Yeah. Safe to say there's not going to be any babies on the way anytime soon, but I'm definitely a little bit jealous that you're at that stage. It's so exciting, and yeah, sending you all lots of love. As usual, any ideas for future videos, pop in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!